The Lakota woman invited the ranch cook on Christmas Eve, and the night changed everything on the ranch. Winter came in slowly at first, like a quiet visitor. Then, one night, it arrived all at once. The wind blew hard across the open fields, and snow began to fall in thick, soft layers. The sky was gray, and the world looked like it had been covered in a white blanket. The ranch house stood alone against the cold, a strong building made of wood and stone. Inside, the fire in the living room crackled and warmed the air, but the ranch still felt quiet and empty in a way that made people think. Mabel stood by the window, watching the snow fall. She was a Lakota woman, born and raised in this land. Her family had lived near the ranch for many years. Some of her relatives had worked here for generations. They knew the land, the weather, and the long history of the place. But even though Mabel felt a deep connection to the land, she also felt the weight of old stories and old wounds. The ranch was a place of work, but it was also a place where people did not always speak kindly to each other. Mabel looked at the table in the dining room. It was set for dinner, but it felt empty. There was a plate for everyone, a cup for each person, and a small candle in the center. She had planned a simple Christmas Eve dinner, just like her family always did. The food was not fancy, but it was warm and real. There was stew in the pot, bread fresh from the oven, and a little bit of sweet pie for dessert. Mabel wanted the night to feel like Christmas, even if the world outside was cold and harsh. The ranch workers were still out in the fields taking care of the animals. The cows needed food, the horses needed shelter, and the barn needed to be checked. In winter, there was no rest. Even on Christmas Eve, the work continued. Mabel understood this. She had seen her family work through many winters. She knew that life on the ranch did not stop for holidays. But she also believed that people needed moments of kindness. She believed that even small gestures could change how people felt. Mabel had been thinking about the ranch cook Hank for days. But Hank was a quiet man who kept to himself. He cooked the meals for everyone, and he did it well. People said he was the best cook on the ranch. His stew was rich and filling, and his bread was always warm and soft. Yet, despite his skill, Hank was not treated like a real part of the family. He was seen as someone who belonged in the kitchen, not in the living room. He was respected for his work, but he was not included in the simple moments that made a house feel like a home. Mabel had watched Hank for a long time. She noticed the way he moved in the kitchen, how his hands worked quickly but gently. She noticed how he would sometimes pause and stare out the window, as if he was thinking about something far away. She noticed that he always ate alone. Even when the ranch workers gathered in the living room after dinner, Hank would stay in the kitchen cleaning dishes and washing pans. No one asked him to join them. No one offered him a seat by the fire. Mabel did not know much about Hank's life. He rarely spoke about himself. When people tried to ask him questions, he would answer with short words and then go back to his work. Some people on the ranch thought he was strange. Others thought he was proud. But Mabel did not think either of those things. She believed that Hank was simply tired. She believed that he had a story that he did not want to share. On the evening of Christmas Eve, Mabel made a decision. She would invite Hank to dinner. She knew the invitation might surprise him. She knew it might surprise her family, too. The ranch was not a place where people mixed easily. The rules of the ranch were old and strong. People stayed in their places, and they did not always cross boundaries. But Mabel had grown tired of those rules. She wanted to change something, even if it was small. She wanted to show that kindness could cross the lines that people had drawn. Mabel walked into the kitchen where Hank was preparing the meal. The smell of the stew filled the air, warm and rich. Hank was stirring the pot with steady hands. His face was calm, but his eyes looked tired. When he saw Mabel, he nodded slightly, as if he expected her to ask for something. "Mabel," he said softly, "dinner will be ready soon." She smiled at him. "Yes," she said. "I know. It smells good." Hank looked at her for a moment, then turned back to the pot. "It is almost ready," he said. Mabel took a deep breath. She felt her heart beat faster. She did not know how he would react. She did not know if he would accept the invitation or refuse it. She did not know if her family would support her, but she felt sure that she had to try. "Hank," she said quietly, "would you like to join us for dinner tonight?" Hank stopped stirring. He looked at her slowly, as if he was not sure he heard her correctly. The sound of the stove and the crackling fire filled the kitchen for a moment, and then the silence returned. Mabel waited. She kept her voice calm, but her hands trembled slightly. Hank's eyes moved toward the window. He looked at the falling snow, then back at Mabel. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply stood still. "Why?" he asked. Mabel felt a wave of surprise. She had expected him to say yes, or maybe to say no. She had not expected him to ask why, but she understood. Hank had lived his life with boundaries. He had learned that invitations could be dangerous. He had learned that kindness could be followed by disappointment. She knew he was asking a real question, not a rude one. "'Cause it's Christmas," she said. "Because we are all here. Because you cook for us every day. Because you deserve to sit at the table like everyone else." Hank looked at her again. His eyes were steady, but there was something in them that made Mabel feel a little sad. He had seen people say words like that before, and then forget them. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said. Mabel shook her head. "You won't," she said. "No one will cause trouble, I promise." Hank's gaze dropped to the pot again. He sighed softly. The sound was almost like a quiet breath. "All right," he said. "I will come." Mabel felt relief and happiness at the same time. She thanked him and went to set the table. She told her family what she had done, and some of them looked surprised. Her mother raised her eyebrows. Her father frowned slightly. A cousin whispered something to another cousin. The ranch hands who were inside the house looked at each other with curiosity. No one spoke openly against it, but the silence itself felt like a question. Mabel did not let the silence stop her. She continued to prepare the table. She placed a small plate for Hank next to everyone else's. She made sure there was a clean napkin, a cup, and a chair pulled out just enough for him to sit comfortably. She wanted the dinner to feel normal. She wanted it to feel like the kind of dinner where no one had to explain themselves. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The wind moved the branches of the trees, making them bend and sway. The ranch looked like a quiet world frozen in time. Inside, the fire kept the house warm. The smell of food filled every room. People began to gather in the dining room, one by one. The ranch hands entered with cold cheeks and red noses. Mabel's family took their seats. Everyone waited for Hank. When Hank entered the dining room, the room grew quiet. He walked slowly, carrying a small plate with a piece of bread he had baked earlier. He looked around at the faces in the room. Some faces looked welcoming. Others looked unsure. Some looked like they wanted to say something, but they did not know how. Hank took his seat at the table. The chair felt heavy, as if it carried more than his weight. He did not smile, but he did not look angry either. He simply sat and waited. Mabel placed the first bowl of stew on the table. She looked at Hank and nodded. He nodded back, and then the meal began. At first, the dinner was quiet. People ate carefully as if they were unsure what to do. Mabel's younger cousin whispered a question to her mother. Her mother answered quietly, and the cousin nodded. The ranch hands ate their food, but they did not speak. Hank ate slowly, his eyes moving around the room. He watched the fire, the walls, the people. He seemed to be taking everything in. Mabel watched him too. She felt a small hope in her heart. She hoped that this night would be different. She hoped that the simple act of inviting him would change something in the ranch. She did not know if it would, but she believed it might. Then, something small happened that changed the mood. A child, a little boy from the ranch family, looked at Hank and asked, "Do you like Christmas?" The question was simple. It was not a deep question, but it was the first question that had been asked out loud. Everyone turned to look at Hank. Hank paused, then looked at the boy. He seemed surprised that someone had asked him something like that. His face softened slightly. "Yes," he said. "I like Christmas." The boy smiled. The smile was small, but it was real. The boy then asked another question, and another, and soon the room began to feel warmer. The silence broke. People started talking. Not loudly, but in small voices. They spoke about the weather, the work, the food. They spoke about small things that mattered. And as they spoke, the tension in the room began to fade. The boundaries that had been so strong felt less solid. The night began to feel like a true Christmas Eve, not just a night of work. Mabel looked at Hank and saw that he was beginning to relax. He was still quiet, but he was no longer tense. He was no longer only the cook. He was a person in the room. He was someone who belonged. Mabel felt something inside her change too. She realized that she had done the right thing. She realized that one small invitation could open a door that had been closed for a long time. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the ranch in a peaceful white. Inside, the ranch house was filled with warmth, food, and the quiet sounds of people sharing a moment together. On that Christmas Eve, the world felt different. It felt softer. It felt like something new was possible. And Mabel knew deep in her heart that the night had already begun to change everything. The ranch house felt warmer as the night went on. The fire burned bright, and the smell of food stayed in the air. The sound of forks and plates filled the room, but the mood was different now. It was no longer quiet and tense. It was more like a real family dinner, where people talked and laughed. Hank sat at the table with the others, but he still looked a little unsure. He had been invited, yes, but he was still not used to being treated like someone who belonged. He had spent many years living in the kitchen, working hard and staying quiet. Now he was sitting at the table with people who had never spoken to him before. Mabel noticed this. She watched him carefully, but she did not stare. She wanted him to feel comfortable. She wanted him to know that he was welcome. "More stew?" Mabel asked, holding the pot. She tried to sound casual, like this was a normal dinner. Hank shook his head. "No, thank you," he said. "It's very good." The words surprised Mabel. Hank had been the one cooking the stew, but now he was praising it. She smiled and set the pot down. A ranch hand named Tom spoke up. He was a man who usually kept his thoughts to himself, but tonight he seemed more open. "Hank," he said, "you've been cooking for us for a long time. I never really thanked you." Hank looked up. His face showed surprise. He did not expect anyone to thank him. Tom continued. "I mean it," he said. "You always make sure we have good food. You work hard." Hank's eyes softened. He looked down at his plate. "Thank you," he said quietly. The words were simple, but they felt heavy in the room. They felt like a bridge between two worlds. Mabel could feel the change happening, slowly but surely. Mabel's father, who had been quiet all evening, finally spoke. His voice was low and serious. "This is a strange night," he said. "I never thought we would sit together like this." Mabel looked at him. She could tell he was trying to understand the moment. He was not angry, but he was not sure either. He had grown up with old ideas. He had grown up believing that people had their places and should not move from them. Mabel's father continued. "But maybe we should," he said. "Maybe we should learn to be kinder." The words surprised everyone. Even Mabel did not expect her father to say something like that. The room became quiet again, but this time it was not tense. It was thoughtful. Hank looked at Mabel's father. He did not know what to say. He had never been praised by someone like this. He had never been given a chance to be seen as a person. "Ah," the child who had asked the first question spoke again. "Do you have a family?" he asked Hank. Hank's face changed. The question was not mean, but it was a question that touched something deep inside him. He looked at the boy, then at the table, then at the fire. "I had a family," he said, slowly, "a long time ago." The boy listened closely. He could tell that Hank was not telling a story. He was telling something real. Hank continued, his voice still calm, but softer now. "They are gone," he said. "I don't have them anymore." The room went quiet. People did not know what to say. They did not want to make Hank feel worse. They also did not want to act like it was not important. The silence was heavy, but it was also respectful. Mabel felt a pain in her chest. She did not know Hank's story, but she could feel the loss in his words. She remembered the stories her own family had told about pain and loss. She remembered how hard it was to keep going when your heart felt broken. Mabel reached out and placed her hand on the table. She did not touch Hank, but she wanted him to feel that someone cared. She hoped he could feel the warmth of her presence. Hank looked at Mabel for a moment. His eyes were full of something that was not anger. It was sadness, yes, but also something else. It was gratitude. He had been invited. He had been heard. He had been given a place at the table. After a moment, Hank spoke again. He looked at the people in the room and spoke with a voice that sounded honest and real. "I didn't expect to be invited," he said. "I didn't expect to be asked to sit with you." The room remained quiet. Hank continued. "I've worked here for a long time," he said. "I have seen many things. I have seen people who are kind and people who are not. But I have never felt like I belonged." Mabel felt tears form in her eyes. She did not want to cry in front of everyone, but she could not stop the emotion. She understood Hank's words. She understood what it meant to feel like you did not belong. Hank took a breath and looked down again. He seemed to gather his strength before he spoke again. "Tonight," he said, "I feel like I belong." The room felt warm in a new way. The fire seemed brighter. The walls felt closer. The people at the table felt closer too. Everyone had felt the weight of the moment. The ranch hands began to speak again, but this time the conversation was different. They did not talk about work. They talked about small things that mattered. They talked about the weather, yes, but also about the holidays, about memories, about things they had never shared before. One of the ranch hands, a woman named Sarah, asked Hank, "What do you do when you are not cooking?" Hank looked surprised. He did not expect anyone to ask him something like that. He thought for a moment. "I like to read," he said. "I like to read stories about faraway places." The room reacted with surprise. People had never known that about him. They had never asked. "What kind of stories?" Mabel asked. Hank smiled slightly, and it was the first time anyone had seen his smile that night. "Stories about people who find their way," he said. "Stories about people who keep going." Mabel felt a new kind of respect for Hank. She realized that he was not only a cook, he was a person who had lived through things and learned how to survive. He had a mind that wanted to learn and a heart that wanted to feel. The dinner continued, and the night moved forward. The food was eaten, and the plates were cleared. People began to stand up, but no one seemed to rush away. The fire kept burning. The room stayed warm. Mabel's mother stood and said, "Let's clean up together." It was a small sentence, but it meant a lot. It meant that the night was not over. It meant that the kitchen was not only for Hank. It meant that everyone would work together. People moved to the kitchen, and the atmosphere became lighter. The sound of water, plates, and laughter filled the air. Mabel helped Hank wash the dishes. She did not know if she should speak, but she felt like she needed to say something. "Hank," she said quietly, "thank you for cooking. Thank you for being here." Hank looked at her. His eyes were bright. "Thank you for inviting me," he said. "It means more than you know." She did not know what else to say. She felt like the night had already changed her. She felt like the ranch had changed too, even if only a little. Outside, the storm continued. The snow fell heavier now. The wind blew stronger. The ranch was quiet and white, and the world felt still. But inside the ranch house, something new was happening. People were beginning to see each other in a different way. People were beginning to understand that kindness was not weak. It was strong. It was brave. Hank finished washing the dishes and stood quietly. He looked around the kitchen and saw the people who had once ignored him. He saw the people who had now spoken to him. He felt something in his heart shift. He looked at Mabel and said, "This is a night I will never forget." Mabel smiled. "Neither will I," she said. The night was not over, but the most important part of it had already happened. A simple invitation had opened a door. A quiet man had been given a place at the table, and for the first time in a long time, the ranch felt like it had a chance to become a better place. Mabel knew that tomorrow would bring work. The animals would need care. The cold would return. Life would go on. But the memory of this night would stay with everyone. It would remind them that kindness could change a heart, and that a single moment could change everything. The ranch was quiet the next morning. The snow had covered everything, and the world looked peaceful. The animals were calm, and the sky was a clear, bright blue. The cold air felt fresh, and the sunlight made the snow sparkle. It was a beautiful winter morning, but it was also a morning of work. Life on the ranch never stopped, even after a special night like Christmas Eve. Mabel woke up early. She could still feel the warmth of the previous night in her body. She remembered the way Hank had looked when he spoke about his family. She remembered the moment when everyone had begun to talk. She remembered the way the ranch had felt, softer, as if it had changed in a small but real way. She walked to the kitchen, and she saw Hank already there. He was making coffee, and the smell of it filled the air. He moved quietly, but with purpose. He was not the kind of man who wasted time. He worked with care, and he worked with pride. Mabel watched him for a moment. She felt a strange mix of emotions. She felt happy that he had been invited. She felt proud that she had done something brave, but she also felt nervous. She did not know what would happen now. She did not know if the kindness of the night would last. She did not know if the ranch would go back to the old ways. Hank looked up when he saw her. He nodded. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Mabel replied. There was a pause. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of the stove. Mabel wanted to say something, but she did not know what. She did not want to make Hank feel uncomfortable. She did not want to act like the invitation was a big deal. "Hank," she said softly, "are you okay?" Hank looked at her for a moment. He seemed to think about the question. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "I am okay." Mabel felt a small smile on her face. She felt relieved. She felt like the night had not been a mistake. She felt like the night had been real. The ranch workers began to arrive in the kitchen, one by one. They came in with cold faces and tired eyes. They spoke softly, and they moved slowly. They had been up early, as they always were, but there was a difference in their steps. There was a difference in their expressions. It was as if the night had changed something in them too. Tom, the ranch hand who had thanked Hank the night before, came in and sat at the table. He looked at Hank and said, "Morning." Hank nodded. "Morning." Tom paused, then added, "I'm sorry if I was too quiet last night. I didn't know what to say." Hank looked at him. He nodded slowly. "It's okay," he said. "I understand." Tom looked at Mabel, and then he looked at Hank again. "You know," he said, "I never thought about what it must be like to work here and never be included." Hank looked down at his coffee. He did not respond right away. Mabel felt a strong feeling inside her. She felt proud of Tom. She felt proud of the way he was speaking. She felt proud that the ranch hands were beginning to think differently. Then something happened that changed the morning. It was not a big event. It was not loud. But it was important. It was a small moment of truth. Hank put down his coffee and said, "I want to tell you something." The room grew quiet. People stopped moving. They looked at him. Some of them looked surprised. Some of them looked nervous. They did not know what Hank would say. Mabel felt her heart beat faster. She wondered what he would say. She wondered if he would share something personal. She wondered if the ranch would be able to accept it. Hank took a deep breath. He looked at the people in the room, and then he began to speak. "I didn't always work here," he said. "I didn't always have a place to stay. I didn't always have a kitchen to cook in." The room was quiet. The ranch workers listened carefully. They could feel that Hank was telling something important. "I was not always safe," Hank continued. "I had a life before this, but it was not good. I lost my family. I lost my home. I lost my hope." Mabel felt a tear in her eye. She did not want to cry, but she could not stop the emotion. She knew that Hank was sharing something that had been heavy in his heart for a long time. Hank continued, "I came here because I needed work. I came here because I needed a place to be. I didn't think anyone would care about me. I didn't think anyone would invite me to dinner." He paused. He looked at Mabel. His eyes were full of something that was hard to describe. It was not only sadness, it was also a sense of being seen. "Last night," he said, "made me feel like I was not invisible." The room stayed quiet. No one knew what to say. They felt the weight of Hank's words. They felt the truth of his pain. They felt the reality of his life. Mabel looked at her father. Her father's face was serious. His eyes were soft. He looked like a man who was learning something new. He looked like a man who was realizing that life was not always simple. Her father spoke quietly. "Hank," he said, "we are sorry. We did not know." Hank looked at him. He nodded slowly. "It's not your fault," he said. "It's not your fault. People just don't think about these things." Mabel felt a sense of relief. She felt like the ranch was starting to understand. She felt like the night had started a change that could continue. But the morning was not only about feelings. The ranch work had to continue. The animals needed care. The snow had to be cleared. The day had to move forward. Mabel and the ranch workers prepared to go outside. They put on heavy coats, boots, and hats. The cold air hit them like a strong wind. The snow was deep. The ground was slippery. It was hard work, but they did it together. Hank stayed behind for a moment. He looked at Mabel. He spoke softly. "Thank you," he said again. "For last night." Mabel nodded. "You are welcome," she said. "I am glad you came." Hank looked at her and then at the door. He seemed to hesitate. He looked like he wanted to say something else. "Mabel," he said, "I want to ask you something." Mabel felt her heart beat faster. "Yes?" she said. Hank looked at her carefully. "Would you like to come to the kitchen sometime when I am not cooking?" he asked. "Just to talk? Just to be friends?" Mabel felt surprised. She had not expected that. She had not expected Hank to ask for friendship. She had expected him to be quiet. She had expected him to stay distant. But Hank was asking. He was opening his heart. Mabel smiled. She felt her eyes fill with tears again, but this time they were happy tears. She nodded. "Yes," she said. "I would like that." Hank nodded. "Good," he said. "Good." They went outside into the cold. The work began. They fed the animals, checked the fences, and cleared the snow. The day was long and hard, but the work felt different. It felt like a team. It felt like people were not only working, but also caring. As the day moved forward, the ranch workers began to speak more openly. They spoke about the night. They spoke about Hank. They spoke about the way things had changed. Tom said, "I didn't know his story. I didn't know he had gone through so much." Sarah added, "I didn't know he liked to read. I always thought he just cooked." Mabel listened. She felt a sense of hope. She felt like the ranch was beginning to change. She felt like the night had not been just a special moment. She felt like it had been a turning point. But the day was not over. The ranch work continued, and the cold grew stronger. The wind blew hard, and the snow kept falling. The sky turned gray again. The weather became worse. Then, in the late afternoon, something happened that no one expected. A call came from the barn. Someone shouted that one of the horses was hurt. The horse had slipped on the ice and fallen. It was not moving. The ranch workers ran to the barn. They saw the horse lying on the ground. The animal was breathing, but it was clearly in pain. The ranch hands were worried. They did not know what to do. Mabel felt her heart beat faster. She had seen horses hurt before, but she had never seen one hurt this badly. She felt fear. She felt sadness. She felt the weight of responsibility. Hank was there too. He looked at the horse. He looked at the ranch workers. He seemed calm, but his eyes were focused. He stepped forward. "I know what to do," he said. The ranch workers looked at him. They were surprised. They did not expect the cook to know anything about horses. But Hank had been on the ranch for a long time. He had learned many things. He had watched. He had listened. He had paid attention. Hank instructed the ranch hands to move the horse gently. He told them how to support its legs. He told them how to keep the animal calm. He told them how to make a warm blanket for the horse to lie on. The ranch workers followed his instructions. They worked together. They moved carefully. They listened to Hank. After a while, the horse began to relax. The pain did not disappear, but the animal was not as scared. Hank stayed with the horse. He spoke softly, as if he was calming a child. Mabel watched him. She felt a deep respect. She realized that Hank was not only a cook. He was a person who knew how to care for life. He was a person who knew how to lead when needed. The night had started with an invitation. It had started with a simple act of kindness. But now, the night was becoming something more. It was becoming a moment of truth. It was becoming a moment of change. Mabel stood by the barn door and watched the people work. She felt a sense of pride. She felt like she had made the right choice. She felt like the ranch was finally beginning to see Hank as more than a cook. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the night was not over yet. Something had happened that would change everything. The true test was not the dinner. The true test was how people would act when it mattered most. The storm continued outside. The ranch was cold. The work was hard. But inside, something new was growing. A new sense of respect. A new sense of unity. A new sense of hope. The night was still young, and the story was not finished. But the change had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The night was still young, but the storm outside had grown stronger. The wind howled across the ranch, and the snow fell heavily, covering the ground like a thick blanket. The sky was dark, and the cold felt sharper than before. The ranch house was warm inside, but the people inside knew the weather was dangerous. They had to be careful. After the horse was hurt, the ranch workers stayed in the barn to help. They moved slowly and quietly, careful not to make the horse panic again. Hank was there, speaking softly and guiding everyone. Mabel stayed close by, watching. She felt nervous, but she also felt calm because Hank knew what he was doing. The horse's name was Daisy. She was a strong, gentle horse, and she had been part of the ranch for many years. Daisy was not just an animal to the ranch workers. She was a part of their lives. She carried supplies, helped with the work, and was a friend to the ranch hands. Seeing her hurt was hard for everyone. Hank instructed the workers to bring warm blankets and water. He told them how to keep Daisy warm and how to check her breathing. The ranch hands listened carefully. They followed his instructions without questioning him. For the first time, they trusted him not only as a cook, but as a person who knew how to care for animals. Mabel felt proud of Hank. She felt proud that he was able to help. She felt proud that the ranch workers were listening. It was a moment she had not expected. It was a moment that showed how much Hank could do when people gave him a chance. The night continued, and the storm grew louder. The wind hit the barn walls like strong hands. The snow piled up outside. The ranch house felt far away, like a safe place on the edge of a dangerous world. The ranch workers stayed in the barn, and they worked together as a team. They took turns watching Daisy. They took turns bringing water. They took turns keeping the fire burning. Mabel noticed something else, too. She noticed that the ranch workers were not acting like they were above Hank. They were not acting like he was only the cook. They were working with him. They were listening to him. They were respecting him. Tom, the ranch hand who had thanked Hank the night before, spoke quietly. "Ah, I didn't know you could do this," he said. Hank looked at him. "I learned," he said. "I watched. I listened. I cared." Tom nodded. He looked at the horse again. "Thank you," he said. Hank did not say much. He simply continued to work. Mabel felt her heart fill with emotion. She felt like the night was changing the ranch in a deep way. It was not just a simple dinner anymore. It was a moment where people were learning to see each other differently. It was a moment where respect was being built. But the night was not easy. The storm was still strong. The ranch workers were tired. They had been working all day. The cold was wearing them down. They had to stay awake and keep Daisy safe. The work was hard, and the night was long. Mabel saw the tiredness on their faces. She saw the way they moved slowly. She saw the way they kept looking at the door, as if they were waiting for the storm to end. She felt a deep sadness. She wished the night could be easier. Hank noticed the tiredness, too. He looked at Mabel and said, "You should go inside. It's too cold out here." Mabel shook her head. "I want to stay." She said, "I want to help." Hank looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded. "All right," he said, "but be careful." Mabel stayed by the barn door watching. She did not do much work, but she wanted to be there. She wanted to be part of the team. She wanted to show that she cared. Then something happened that made the night even more difficult. A loud sound came from outside. It was a loud crack, like a tree breaking. The ranch workers looked up, and they saw that the barn roof was shaking. Snow had piled up on the roof, and the weight was heavy. The roof began to creak. Everyone froze. They knew what it meant. If the roof collapsed, the horse could be hurt again. The workers could be hurt too. The barn could be destroyed. It was a dangerous moment. Hank quickly took charge. He told everyone to move Daisy away from the wall. He told them to clear the snow from the roof. He told them to stay calm. He spoke with a steady voice, and the workers followed him. The workers moved fast. They used shovels to remove the snow. They worked together, lifting the heavy snow and throwing it away from the barn. The wind made the work harder. The snow was heavy and wet. The cold was biting. But they worked quickly because they knew the danger. Mabel watched in fear. She felt her heart beat fast. She did not know if the roof would hold. She did not know if they would be safe. But Hank stayed calm. He did not panic. He did not shout. He simply guided the workers and helped them. His voice was steady, and it helped everyone stay focused. After a while, the snow was cleared. The roof stopped creaking. The danger passed. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The barn was safe again. Daisy was safe again. The ranch workers looked at Hank. They looked at him with new respect. They realized that he was not only a cook. He was a person who could lead. He was a person who could stay calm in a dangerous moment. He was a person who could help. Mabel felt her eyes fill with tears. She did not know if she could hold them back. She felt the emotion of the night, the fear, the relief, the respect, all mixing together. Tom walked up to Hank. He placed his hand on Hank's shoulder. "You did good," he said. "You did real good." Hank nodded. He did not speak. He simply continued to check on Daisy. Mabel's father also came to the barn. He looked at Hank and said, "I'm sorry I didn't see you before. I'm sorry I didn't know." Hank looked at him. "It's okay," he said. "It's not your fault." Mabel's father shook his head. "No," he said. "It is my fault. No, I should have been kinder. I should have seen you as a person." Hank looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded. "Thank you," he said. Mabel felt her heart swell with pride. She felt proud of her father. She felt proud that he was willing to admit his mistake. She felt proud that the ranch was changing. But the night was still not over. The storm was still outside. The ranch workers were still tired. The horse was still hurt. The work was still heavy. Mabel knew that the night was a test. It was a test of kindness, of courage, of strength. It was a test of whether people could change. As the night moved forward, the ranch workers continued to care for Daisy. They kept the fire burning. They kept the blankets warm. They kept the horse calm. They worked together, and they worked as a team. Mabel stayed with them. She did not leave. She wanted to be part of the change. She wanted to show that she was not afraid. Hank looked at her and said, "You were brave tonight." Mabel smiled. "So were you," she said. Hank nodded. "Maybe we can be brave together," he said. Mabel felt a warm feeling in her heart. She nodded again. "Yes," she said. "Maybe we can." The storm continued outside, but inside the barn there was a new sense of hope. There was a new sense of unity. There was a new sense of respect. The night had started with a simple invitation. It had started with a dinner. But now it had become something much more. It had become a night where people learned to see each other as humans. It had become a night where kindness became stronger than fear. Mabel knew that the morning would come soon. She knew that the work would continue. She knew that life on the ranch would go back to normal. But she also knew that the ranch would never be the same. The night had changed everything. And as the storm continued outside, Mabel felt a quiet peace inside. She knew that the change was real. She knew that the night had shown the ranch what was possible when people chose kindness. The first light of morning arrived slowly. The sky was pale blue and the snow looked bright and clean. The storm had passed. The wind had quieted. The ranch was calm again. The world felt peaceful, but it also felt different. The night had been long and hard, and it had changed the people who lived there. Mabel woke up early again. She felt tired, but her heart felt light. She remembered the night, the way everyone had worked together, the way Hank had guided them. She remembered the moment when her father admitted his mistake. She remembered the way the ranch workers had looked at Hank with new respect. She got dressed and went outside. The air was cold, but the sunlight made the snow sparkle. The ranch looked beautiful. The trees were covered in snow. The fields were white and wide. The world felt clean, like a fresh start. Mabel walked toward the barn. She wanted to see Daisy. She wanted to know if the horse was okay. She wanted to see the work that had been done. She wanted to feel the new sense of hope again. When she reached the barn, she saw the ranch workers already there. They were feeding the animals, checking the fences, and cleaning the stalls. They looked tired, but they also looked strong. They looked like people who had been through something together. Hank was there too. He was standing by the stall where Daisy was. The horse was resting, and she looked calmer than the night before. The blankets were warm. The fire was still burning. The barn felt safe. Mabel walked closer. She saw Hank gently pat Daisy's neck. The horse seemed to trust him. She looked calm, like she knew he was there to help. Hank looked up when he saw Mabel. He smiled slightly. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Mabel replied. There was a moment of quiet. Mabel felt a sense of peace. She felt like the world was okay again. She felt like the ranch was okay again. Then her father approached. He walked slowly, as if he was thinking. He looked at Hank, and he spoke with a serious voice. "Hank," he said, "I want to thank you." Hank looked at him. "Thank you for what?" he asked. "For everything you did last night," Mabel's father said. "You saved Daisy. You kept us calm. You showed us that you care." Hank looked down for a moment. Then he looked up again. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "We did it together." Mabel's father nodded. "Yes," he said. "We did. But you were the one who led us." Hank's face changed slightly. He looked a little surprised. He did not expect to be praised like this. He had always been quiet, always in the background. He had never been the leader, but now he had been. "Thank you," Hank said softly. Mabel felt a tear in her eye. She felt proud of her father. She felt proud of Hank. She felt proud of the ranch workers. She felt proud of herself. She had started something that had become bigger than she expected. The ranch workers gathered around. They looked at Hank. They looked at each other. They smiled. The mood was different now. It was lighter. It was happier. It was real. Tom spoke first. "Hank," he said, "I want to apologize too." Hank looked at him. "For what?" he asked. "For not seeing you," Tom said. "For not knowing your story. For not treating you like a person." Hank nodded. "It's okay," he said. "We are all learning." Sarah, the ranch hand, stepped forward. "I want to thank you too," she said. "You taught us something last night. You showed us that kindness is not weak. It is strong." Hank looked at her. He smiled slightly. "Thank you," he said again. Mabel felt her heart fill with emotion. She felt like she was watching something important. She felt like she was watching a change happen in real time. She felt like the ranch had become a better place. The day continued. The ranch work went on. The animals were fed. The fences were checked. The snow was cleared. The world returned to normal, but the people on the ranch were not the same. They spoke differently now. They spoke with more respect. They spoke with more kindness. They spoke with more understanding. Mabel noticed that Hank was no longer only in the kitchen. He was in the living room sometimes. He was in the barn sometimes. He was in the fields. Sometimes he was no longer invisible. He was a part of the ranch. Mabel's mother, who had been quiet at first, began to speak to Hank more often. She asked him about his day. She asked him if he needed anything. She offered him warm coffee and extra food. She began to treat him like family. Mabel felt happy, but she also felt something else. Eyes. She felt a sense of responsibility. She felt like she had started something, and now she had to keep it going. She had to make sure that the kindness did not disappear. She thought about the invitation. She thought about how simple it was. She thought about how one small action had changed the ranch. She realized that kindness did not need to be loud. It did not need to be big. It only needed to be real. Later that day, Mabel went to the kitchen. Hank was there preparing dinner again. He was working quietly, but his movements seemed lighter. He seemed happier. He seemed more comfortable. Mabel stood by the counter. She watched him work. She felt a sense of peace. She felt like she was watching a man who had found a place where he belonged. "Hank," she said softly, "I wanted to ask you something." Hank looked at her. "Yes?" he asked. Mabel took a deep breath. She felt her heart beat faster. She felt nervous, but she also felt brave. "Would you like to stay for dinner again tonight?" she asked. "Not just because it is Christmas, but because we want you here." Hank looked at her for a moment. He smiled, and this time his smile was real and bright. "Yes," he said, "I would like that." Mabel felt her heart fill with joy. She felt like the ranch had truly changed. She felt like the night had truly changed everything. The sun began to set. The sky turned orange and pink. The snow sparkled in the fading light. The ranch looked peaceful. The world felt calm. Inside the ranch house, the fire burned. The smell of food filled the air. The people gathered together again. They spoke, they laughed, they shared stories. The night felt warm and safe. Hank sat at the table with everyone. He was not quiet anymore. He spoke, and people listened. He shared stories, and people smiled. He was not only the cook, he was a friend. Mabel sat beside him. She looked at him and smiled. She felt a deep sense of gratitude. She felt like she had done something important. She felt like she had made a difference. The night was quiet and calm. The world outside was cold, but inside the ranch house there was warmth. There was kindness. There was a sense of belonging. Mabel thought about the first night she invited Hank. She thought about the way people had looked at him. She thought about the way the ranch had felt. She thought about the way everything had changed. She knew that the change was not finished. She knew that there would still be hard days. She knew that the ranch would still have its challenges, but she also knew that the night had opened a door. The door was open now. The ranch could move forward. The people could choose kindness. The people could choose respect. The people could choose to see each other as human beings, and Mabel knew, deep in her heart, that the night had changed everything, not only for Hank, but for everyone on the ranch. The story of that Christmas Eve would stay with them for years. It would be a story they would tell their children. It would be a story that would remind them that one small act of kindness could change a whole place. And in the quiet of the ranch, with the fire burning and the snow outside, Mabel smiled. She knew that the night had been real. She knew that the change was real. And she knew that, because of that night, the ranch would never be the same again.